I am Harley Steve, 32 years old, from Las Vegas. The night I decided to tell my family that I wanted to be an influencer, they laughed so hard that even the neighbors must have heard. We were sitting around my aunt's long dining table, the air thick with roasted turkey, perfume, and judgment. My cousins, Lana, the lawyer, and Chris, the soon-to-be real estate mogul, had just finished talking about their careers when my aunt turned to me. "So, Harley," she asked, slicing her steak, "what are you planning to do now that you've quit your marketing job?" I took a breath. I'm starting a content channel. I want to build a brand, lifestyle, travel, maybe fashion too. For a second, silence. Then came the laughter. Chris nearly choked on his drink. "Wait, like, you're gonna be one of those girls who dance on TikTok for money?" Lana smirked. "Oh my God, Harley. You're 32, not 13. Why would anyone watch you?" Even my mother sighed, her eyes darting toward the tablecloth. "Harley, be serious. You had a stable job. You can't just waste your time chasing internet fame." The laughter stung, but it was my father's look, that disappointed headshake, that burned the deepest. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? I'd ask anyone listening now, share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. I remember gripping my glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. The sound of their voices blurred into one cruel echo. "You'll never make it. It's embarrassing. No one's gonna care." But I cared, and that was enough. I left the dinner early, the Vegas strip lights flashing outside like the pulse of a world I wasn't part of yet. As I drove home, the tears came fast, hot, unstoppable. But beneath them, something else stirred. Anger, maybe, or resolve. They didn't see what I saw. I remembered being a kid, always behind a camera. I'd film everything. My mom cooking, my friends laughing at the park, even stray cats under streetlights. Storytelling was in my bones. I'd built campaigns for big brands, made other people's visions go viral. Why couldn't I do it for myself? Still, their laughter haunted me. Every click of a car blinker felt like mockery. Every glowing billboard seemed to whisper, "Who do you think you are?" By the time I reached my apartment, I'd already made up my mind. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to prove it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, fingers trembling as I created my first account. A Harley in focus. The bio read, "Turning moments into magic." No one believed in me, but I hit post anyway. The video was simple, just me, sitting on my balcony with Vegas lights behind me, talking about quitting a job that didn't fulfill me. I didn't have ring lights, microphones, or even editing skills, just honesty. When I woke up the next morning, the video had 312 views. No comments, no likes worth mentioning. But still, 312 people had seen me. It was enough to start. Over the next few weeks, I filmed daily. Sometimes it was sunrise coffee shots, sometimes behind-the-scenes clips of my messy apartment setup. My cousins kept sending each other screenshots, mocking my small view counts. One even commented "influencer phase" with a laughing emoji. I ignored it. By the third month, one of my reels hit 15,000 views, a morning routine vlog that somehow resonated with women my age. Suddenly, my DMs were full of encouragement. "You're so real." I needed this today. For the first time, I felt seen. Then, one evening, while I was filming a skincare tutorial in my tiny bathroom, my phone buzzed. A notification popped up. And Glovita Official mentioned you in their story. They'd reposted my video, the same one my cousins mocked. Within hours, my follower count exploded. The next family dinner came 2 months later. I almost didn't go, but part of me wanted to. Not to boast, but to see if they'd say it again. As I walked in, Lana looked up from her phone. "Oh, look who's here, the influencer," she teased. Chris grinned. "So, how's TikTok fame treating you? You getting free shampoo yet?" I smiled, setting my phone on the table. "Actually, yeah. And it's not just shampoo." Their laughter faltered. I opened my notifications, sponsorship emails, partnership invites, a collaboration with a Vegas brand. For once, the silence was mine. I'll never forget the look on my father's face when I showed him my first official brand deal contract. The same man who told me to get a real job. He didn't say much that night, but I caught the faintest curve of a smile. "Be careful with this online stuff," he said, trying to sound stern. "It can disappear as quickly as it comes." Maybe he was right, but I wasn't afraid anymore, because every cruel laugh, every dismissive glance, every whispered "she'll fail" had built something stronger in me than approval ever could. By the end of that year, I'd hit 500,000 followers. My face was on billboards, my words quoted in articles. And my cousins, the same ones who laughed, started tagging me in their posts. Shout out to my cousin Harley in Focus for inspiring women everywhere. I stared at that caption for a long time before finally smiling. Not out of pride, but peace, because I'd realized the sweetest revenge wasn't proving them wrong. It was becoming so content with my truth that their opinions no longer mattered, and that was just the beginning. After that night, I thought the laughter would fade with time, but in a family like mine, mockery was tradition, and I was the latest holiday special. Every call from my mother started with concern and ended in critique. "Harley, you've always been creative, but this internet thing isn't real work." "It's real enough to make people money," I'd reply. "You're not those people," she'd sigh, as if that was the end of it. And maybe that was the problem. I was never one of those people. I was the quiet one in a loud family, the girl who doodled in notebooks while my cousins debated stocks and politics. They measured success in degrees and titles. I measured mine in freedom. The truth is, I didn't grow up in the bright chaos of the Vegas Strip. My world was smaller, the outer neighborhoods, where gossip moved faster than traffic and dreams were treated like impractical hobbies. At the coffee shop down the block, the barista, Kayla, always asked, "So, how's your influencer thing going?" Her smile was sweet, but her tone, it carried the same skepticism as my aunt's dinner table. Sometimes I'd nod and say, "It's going." Other times I'd just smile back, sip my latte, and stare out the window at the neon signs flickering in the distance, as if they were blinking Morse code messages meant for me alone. Keep going. Keep trying. But the laughter wasn't just from family or neighbors. It came from within too. When you start something new, something unconventional, the hardest part isn't the world's doubt. It's your own. The first 6 months were brutal. My savings drained fast. Rent, equipment, and endless cups of overpriced coffee ate through what I had left. Some nights I'd sit on the floor surrounded by camera cables and post-it notes, wondering if my cousins were right. "Maybe this is stupid," I whispered once to myself. But then, a message popped up on my screen, a comment from a young girl in Ohio. "You made me believe I can start again." "Thank you, Harley." I stared at it for a long time, tears blurring my vision. One stranger's words outshined 1,000 of my family's doubts. That night, I wrote in my notebook, the same one I'd used since college. The world doesn't get to decide what's real. I do. By the 7th month, things began shifting. My videos were getting noticed, not by family, not by friends, but by people who saw themselves in me. Single moms, burnt-out employees, people rebuilding after heartbreak. They didn't care that my lighting wasn't perfect, or that I filmed in my kitchen. They cared that I was honest, and honesty, it's something my world wasn't used to. Still, every time I posted something raw, a story about failure or losing everything to find myself, someone I knew would text me, "Girl, you shouldn't post that. It's embarrassing. You're oversharing again." People don't need to know your life. But people did, because for every critic, there were 10 more who said, "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." One afternoon, I got an email from a producer of a small lifestyle podcast. They'd seen my content and wanted me to share my story. I said yes before reading the details. It wasn't a big opportunity, but it was mine. When the episode aired, I didn't expect much. Maybe a few new followers, a couple of supportive messages. But what I got instead was a phone call I never thought I'd receive. It was my cousin Lana. "Harley," she said, her voice unusually soft. listened to that interview. You sounded good. Thanks, I said, waiting for the catch. No, really. You made some solid points about finding purpose. Maybe I misjudged what you're doing. I smiled faintly, though I didn't believe her yet. That's nice to hear. Yeah, she said after a pause. Anyway, I was wondering, could you help me grow my firm's Instagram presence? You've got experience now, right? There it was, we had the catch. That call was the turning point. It wasn't just that she wanted my help. It was that she finally saw value in something she once mocked. But I didn't jump at the offer. I told her I was busy, which for the first time in my life wasn't a lie, because suddenly I was. My calendar was full. Brand collaborations were trickling in, and a few companies had reached out about consulting on influencer marketing. I'd gone from the family failure to the expert no one wanted to admit they needed. And yet, the more success I tasted, the more I realized something important. Revenge wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was silent, steady, and slow, building brick by brick in the dark until one day it towered over everything that tried to bury you. Still, part of me longed for their validation, a weakness I hated admitting. At our next family gathering, my mother introduced me like she always did. This is my daughter Harley. She's doing social media stuff. But this time, before anyone could smirk, my uncle leaned forward and said, "Wait, you're that Harley? My wife follows you. She loves your videos." The room shifted. My cousins glanced at each other, a flash of recognition crossing their faces. That moment, that tiny, delicious silence, was worth every sleepless night. After dinner, I walked outside, the night air cool and bright with city lights. I opened my phone and saw my newest post had just crossed 1 million views. My hand trembled slightly. Not from disbelief, but from gratitude. Because for years, I'd believed I had to be accepted to be enough. Now I finally understood. Being enough was never about being accepted. It was about refusing to quit when no one clapped for you. As I looked up at the night sky over Vegas, I whispered to myself, they'll never laugh the same way again. And I meant it. The first time I realized success could attract betrayal. It wasn't from the family that once mocked me. It came from someone I thought was on my side. Her name was Mira, another content creator I'd met through a brand event in Los Angeles. She had that kind of effortless confidence that made you want to orbit her. When we first talked, it was instant chemistry, creative minds clicking, finishing each other's sentences about editing styles, audience engagement, and storytelling. "You've got something rare, Harley," she said, clinking her glass against mine that night. "You're real. That's what people love." Those words felt like sunlight. After years of being surrounded by people who belittled my dreams, Mira was the first who genuinely seemed to believe in me. We started collaborating. Small videos, joint live streams, meetups. My audience loved our friendship, calling us the dynamic duo. But behind the filters and smiles, something darker was brewing. Something I didn't see coming. At first, it was little things. Mira started posting similar content right after I did. Same lighting, same quotes, even using captions almost word for word. I brushed it off. Inspiration happens, right? Then, during one of our live streams, she cut me off mid-sentence and said with a laugh, "You know, Harley's the creative one. I'm just the one who actually gets things done." The comments rolled in. So true. Mira's the professional. Harley's great, but Mira really knows how to handle business. It shouldn't have bothered me, but it did. Because the truth was, I was the one handling the business. I was the one negotiating brand deals, setting up shoots, scripting our videos, but Mira was the louder voice. And in a world that rewards confidence over substance, she was starting to win. One morning, I got an email from Luxe Glow, a major beauty brand I'd been dreaming of working with. My heart raced as I read the opening line. "Hi, Harley. Thank you for your application. Unfortunately, we've decided to move forward with another creator who aligns more closely with our current direction." I frowned. I'd never applied to Luxe Glow. Confused, I called the contact listed in the email. "Hi, this is Harley Steve. I just got an email about my application, but I think there's been a mistake." "I never submitted one." There was a pause. Oh, the rep said cautiously. That's odd. We received an email from your address last week. It included your portfolio and, well, some notes suggesting your metrics weren't authentic. My stomach dropped. Excuse me? They forwarded the email, and there it was. A message supposedly from me, saying I had inflated numbers, with a few snide remarks about other creators like Mira being more genuine. It was my name. My signature, but not my words. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was like being hit by a betrayal I didn't even know I was inviting. I called Mira immediately. Did you send something to LuxGlow? I asked, my voice shaking. What? No, of course not, she laughed. Why would I do that? Her denial sounded smooth, too smooth. But when I checked her Instagram story later that day, I saw it. A photo of a LuxGlow PR box, her name printed in gold on the lid, captioned, "Dreams do come true." That was the moment the spark inside me turned into fire. I didn't confront her again. I didn't post about it or tell anyone. I just worked. Harder, smarter, sharper. If she wanted to play dirty, I would play strategic. I studied everything I could about algorithms, timing, sponsorship psychology. I started waking up at 5 a.m., scripting my content with precision, planning every caption, every keyword. While Mira chased viral trends, I built a foundation, one that wouldn't crumble when the spotlight shifted. Months passed. Slowly, my numbers climbed again. My content reached audiences outside the lifestyle niche: motivational, personal growth, creative entrepreneurship. I became the woman who talked about rejection and resilience, not makeup and filters. And people resonated with that more than I could have imagined. I received an invitation from InspireCon, a major digital creators conference in Chicago. They wanted me to give a keynote, turning pain into power. It felt poetic. The same pain Mira tried to use against me was now the fuel for my rise. When I arrived at the conference, I saw her, Mira, dressed in her flawless white jumpsuit, surrounded by photographers. She looked at me across the lobby and smiled. That same glossy, calculated smile. Harley, she said, pulling me into a hug that reeked of perfume and pretense. Can you believe we both got invited? I guess the universe rewards hard work. Yeah, I said, meeting her eyes. It rewards the truth, too. She blinked, but before she could answer, one of the organizers walked up to me. Mrs. Steve, the main stage is ready. They're waiting for you. Mira's smile faltered. Main stage? The organizer nodded. She's the keynote speaker. As I walked on stage, lights flashing, cameras rolling, I felt every ounce of pain, doubt, and humiliation melt into something fierce. I began my speech not with a success story, but with a confession. I used to let people define what I was capable of, I said, scanning the crowd. I used to let others take credit, talk louder, and twist my truth. But then I realized, no one can ruin your reputation faster than you can rebuild it. The room erupted in applause. In that moment, I wasn't just a content creator. I was a story, one that couldn't be forged or copied. Afterward, when I stepped backstage, Mira was waiting. You did great, she said tightly. Really powerful speech. Thanks, I replied. Maybe next time you'll get the keynote spot. Her jaw clenched. You know, Harley, success doesn't last forever. No, I said, smiling. But integrity does. I walked away before she could respond, the echo of my heels mixing with the fading cheers from the audience. That night, in my hotel room overlooking the Chicago skyline, I opened my laptop. My inbox was overflowing. Collaborations, speaking offers, partnerships. But tucked between them was one message that made me pause. From LuxGlow, official subject, a second look. Hi, Harley. We owe you an apology. After internal review, we discovered false correspondence under your name. We'd love to discuss a potential partnership, if you're still interested, I smiled, closing my eyes for a moment. The universe really does reward hard work. And the truth. The applause faded faster than I expected. After the conference in Chicago, my name was buzzing in the creator community. My follower count jumped, emails poured in, and even news outlets wanted interviews. It was everything I had dreamed of. Yet when the lights dimmed and the cameras stopped rolling, I felt something hollow in the pit of my chest. No one tells you that success can be the loneliest sound in the world. I had spent so long fighting to be heard, to be seen, to be taken seriously. But now that everyone was finally watching, I didn't know how to be anymore. When I returned to Vegas, my apartment felt smaller. The same walls that once witnessed my grind now felt like barriers. I opened my phone. Hundreds of notifications, brand deals, praise, hate. For every "you inspire me," there were 2 "you've changed." Mira had started her own subtle campaign. Not direct attacks. She was too smart for that. But passive digs in her captions. Some people pretend to be authentic for engagement. I just live it. Her followers ate it up, and some of mine drifted away, unsure who to believe. I learned quickly that fame wasn't about being loved. It was about being watched. I began working longer hours, terrified of slipping. My morning coffee turned into energy drinks, my nights into editing marathons. Sometimes I'd stare at my reflection in the dark screen of my laptop, barely recognizing the woman looking back. Was this the revenge I wanted? To prove everyone wrong at the cost of myself? My mother called one night, just as I was uploading a campaign video. "Harley," she said softly. "Are you eating properly?" "I'm fine, Mom," I said, forcing a laugh. "You sound tired." "I'm just busy." "Busy isn't always good, honey," she murmured. "You can be full and starving at the same time." Her words stuck with me, a quiet truth I didn't want to face. Weeks passed. The pressure grew. The brands wanted more, the audience expected deeper stories, and the algorithm, that invisible god, demanded sacrifice. I started canceling plans, ignoring texts, even skipping family calls. The same people who once mocked me now begged for my attention, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. It was easier to be admired from a distance than questioned up close. Then came the panic attack. It hit me while filming a day-in-my-life vlog. I was halfway through a skincare tutorial when my hands started trembling. My breath caught in my throat, the camera lens blurring as my heartbeat roared in my ears. I collapsed onto the couch, clutching my chest, tears spilling without warning. It felt like the universe had pulled the plug, and all the noise I'd been running from came flooding back. I didn't post for 2 weeks after that. When I finally opened my phone again, I expected silence. Instead, my followers had noticed my absence and cared. Messages filled my inbox. "We miss you. Take your time. We'll be here. You helped me through my breakdown. Now let us help you." For the first time in months, I realized I didn't have to pretend. So I did something terrifying. I told the truth. I filmed a video titled, "What Success Really Feels Like." No makeup, no editing, just me, raw, tired, honest. I talked about burnout, loneliness, and the fear of losing yourself in the chase for validation. By morning, it had gone viral, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. That video changed everything. It wasn't just a confession, it was a lifeline. Brands reached out not for glossed-over ads, but for authenticity. Viewers opened up about their own struggles. My inbox became a mosaic of shared pain and healing. Even my mother called again, this time crying softly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Not because you're famous, because you're brave." I sat in silence after that, staring at the blinking light of my camera, realizing that maybe revenge wasn't about proving others wrong. Maybe it was about proving to yourself that you could survive what tried to destroy you. But as peace began to settle in, something unexpected happened. Mira resurfaced. She sent me a message. Casual but loaded. "Hey, I saw your video. Brave stuff. You're really growing, huh?" I hesitated before replying. "Thanks." Then came the next line. "I'm launching a mental health podcast. Would love to have you on." I stared at her text, my jaw tightening. The same woman who forged my name, the one who mocked authenticity, now wanted to profit off mine. My old self would have said no, blocked her, maybe even exposed her. But I wasn't that Harley anymore. Instead, I agreed, because sometimes revenge isn't fire, It's light. The day of the podcast, I walked into the studio calm, steady. Mira greeted me with her practiced warmth, the cameras rolling, her followers watching live. "So, Harley," she began, her tone sweet as honey. "You've been through so much. How do you stay authentic in a world full of fakes?" I smiled. "By remembering that truth doesn't need to compete. It just needs to exist." The silence that followed was delicious. Her viewers filled the chat with comments. "Wow, that's deep. Harley always keeps it real." And Mira's smile? It cracked. Just a little. That night, I walked out of that studio lighter than I'd felt in years. Vegas glittered in the distance. The same city that once mocked me, now reflecting my glow. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I wasn't begging for validation. I was simply living. And that was my quietest, most powerful victory yet. Power doesn't arrive with a loud announcement. It creeps in quietly, right after you've survived the kind of pain that was supposed to break you. For me, it began the morning after Mira's podcast. My phone buzzed nonstop, hundreds of notifications, messages, tags. The clip of my answer, "Truth doesn't need to compete. It just needs to exist," had gone viral across multiple platforms. People weren't just sharing it. They were dissecting it, quoting it, feeling it. It was the first time my words, not my looks, not my content style, but my truth, had taken on a life of their own. That morning, I brewed a cup of coffee, opened my laptop, and stared at the analytics dashboard that used to intimidate me. Every number that once looked like a judgment now felt like a door I finally knew how to walk through. Spent the entire day studying my own content, like it belonged to someone else. What worked? What didn't? What made people pause? What made them stay? I realized something fundamental. I had been trying to fit into the influencer mold. Now I was done fitting. I was going to build my own frame. So, I pivoted. Instead of influencer videos, I started producing long-form storytelling content. Raw, personal, emotional, with a purpose. I spoke about growing up unheard, about family expectations, about chasing unconventional dreams, and it resonated. My new series, Quiet Strength, became an overnight sensation. The comments flooded in. This made me cry. I thought I was the only one who felt this invisible. Thank you for saying what my family never let me. Within a month, I was featured in 2 online magazines, invited to speak at a women's empowerment summit, and approached by a documentary producer who wanted to capture my story. The girl they once mocked for chasing. Internet fame was suddenly being called a voice for a generation. But it wasn't just about recognition. It was about realization. The more I shared, the more I discovered that revenge didn't always mean watching others fail. Sometimes it meant watching yourself rise so high they couldn't even reach your shadow. Still, my family's voices echoed in my head. You'll never make it on your own. You need stability, not dreams. And one night, while reviewing my inbox, I found their names again, in the unlikeliest place. An email from Win Media, a production company owned by my uncle's firm. Subject line, partnership inquiry, Harley Steve. I laughed, loudly, bitterly. The same family that had once hidden my achievements, told me to get a real job, now wanted to partner with me. Their offer was generous, on paper. A joint venture, combining their media resources with my brand presence. But I could smell it. It wasn't partnership, it was ownership. They wanted to take credit for my success now that it had value. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I called my mother. "Mom," I said, "did Uncle Rob ask you to tell me about the email?" She hesitated. "He mentioned it. He said it's a good opportunity, Harley. They just want to help you grow." I smiled into the phone, though she couldn't see it. "I already am growing, Mom, without them." The next week, I was scheduled to give a keynote at the Vegas Rising Entrepreneurs Gala. The audience? Business leaders, investors, creators, including, as fate would have it, members of my own family. I wore a sleek black jumpsuit, the kind that made me feel powerful without trying. As I walked onto the stage, the room dimmed. Cameras clicked. "My name is Harley Steve," I began, steady and sure. And I used to think success was about being accepted, about proving myself to people who never believed in me. But I've learned something. You don't need to be chosen when you can choose yourself. The crowd leaned in. I built this from nothing, I continued, my voice stronger now. No connections, no favors. Just the belief that my story, our stories, matter. And if anyone here has ever been told that your dream is too small, too risky, or too unrealistic, remember, that's only because they were too scared to imagine it themselves. The applause was thunderous. I saw faces from my past in the crowd, cousins, aunts, my mother wiping a tear, my uncle stone-faced beside her. Revenge had never felt so silent and so sweet. After the event, I stepped outside into the Vegas night air, the neon lights painting everything gold and crimson. My phone buzzed again, this time a message from my uncle. You were incredible tonight. We'd still like to discuss the partnership. Call me when you're ready. I smiled and typed my response slowly. Thank you for believing in me, even if it took the whole world to convince you. I never hit send. I deleted it instead. Some messages didn't deserve answers. The following month, I launched my own digital storytelling platform, The Haven, a space for creators, survivors, and dreamers to share their journeys without judgment. I funded it myself, using every ounce of savings I'd earned through speaking, partnerships, and campaigns that I built with integrity. The first story featured wasn't mine. It was from a single mom in Texas who'd lost everything but her will to start over. Her story went viral, and she messaged me crying, saying she finally felt seen. That's when it hit me. I didn't just find my power, I was now giving it to others. As I scrolled through my dashboard that night, watching stories pour in from around the world, I whispered to myself, this is it. This is what they could never take. Because power, I learned, isn't about control. It's about creation, and as for my family, they could keep their silence. I'd built something louder than their approval. Something real. Success had finally given me peace. But peace never lasts long when old ghosts still breathe your name. It started with an invitation. A national network was producing a live special called Homegrown Voices, the stories behind the success. It was a high-profile feature that celebrated self-made entrepreneurs, artists, and creators who had defied the odds. And there, right at the top of the guest list, was my name, Harley Steve. I was thrilled. But what caught my eye was the location, Vermont, the same small town my extended family still lived in. The same place I had left behind years ago. The irony was almost cinematic. As I read through the event details, I saw it clearly. An opportunity not just to share my story, but to control it. For years, my family had rewritten my narrative, downplaying my achievements, pretending I was a phase they didn't need to acknowledge. Now, the world was inviting me to speak, and they would have to listen. It wasn't about revenge in the cruel sense. It was about balance, about truth finding its voice after being silenced for too long. So I began preparing. Not just a speech, a moment. The setup took weeks. I worked with my creative director to produce a short video montage that would play before my segment. I insisted it include old photos, childhood snapshots, early failures, my small-town library job, and even clips of my first viral videos. But the final frame? That would be the statement. It would read, "They hid my achievements. Now the world celebrates them." It was bold. It was personal. It was the line I had been waiting years to say aloud. The day of the event arrived. I landed in Vermont to a crisp morning that smelled like rain and nostalgia. The studio was buzzing with production teams, journalists, and local news crews. When I walked in, I was met with polite smiles, and one familiar face I hadn't expected. Harley? I turned. It was Aunt Louise, the family's self-appointed spokesperson. Her expression was a careful blend of surprise and condescension. "Well, look at you," she said, scanning my outfit. "All fancy now. We've been watching your videos. Quite dramatic, aren't they?" I smiled calmly. "Good to know I have such loyal viewers," she chuckled nervously. "You know, your mother told us about this event. The whole family's tuning in. We're proud of you, really." It was the kind of pride that sounded like guilt wearing a disguise. Backstage, as the crew adjusted my mic, I felt the adrenaline hum beneath my skin. My hands weren't shaking, not this time. I was steady, anchored by years of being underestimated. A producer leaned over. "We'll cue your intro in 30 seconds, Ms. Steve. Anything you'd like to add?" "Yes," I said, glancing at the monitor showing the montage. "Make sure the last frame holds for 5 seconds. Let them read it." He nodded, unaware that he'd just become part of my closure. When the lights dimmed and the host's voice filled the air, I walked onto the stage. Applause rose like a wave, warm, genuine, thunderous. "Tonight," the host said, "we're joined by one of the most inspiring, self-made voices in the digital world, Harley Steve. Her story began in a small town right here in Vermont, where dreams weren't always taken seriously, but that didn't stop her." The video played. The audience watched my journey unfold. From that small room with peeling paint where I filmed my first post, to the conferences, the podcasts, the global reach, and then the last frame appeared. They hid my achievements. Now the world celebrates them. There was a pause, a beat of silence heavy with understanding, before the applause broke again. That sound, in that moment, was the closure I hadn't known I needed. During the interview, the host asked the question I knew was coming. "Harley, your story isn't just about success. It's about resilience. But there's a part of it many people relate to. Not being believed by those closest to you. How did you overcome that?" I leaned forward, my voice calm, deliberate. "You stop waiting for validation," I said. "You realize that some people can't celebrate you because your courage exposes their fear. And when you understand that, you stop needing their applause." Gasps rippled softly through the audience. I smiled. "But I do believe in forgiveness, just not the kind that forgets. Forgiveness that frees you, not them." After the show, journalists crowded around for interviews, flashbulbs bursting like fireworks. I answered a few questions, then excused myself to step outside. That's when I saw them. My family, standing near the exit, huddled together like a painting of discomfort. My uncle avoided my eyes. My cousins fidgeted. "Harley," Aunt Louise said again, this time softer. "That was powerful. You really made a name for yourself." I looked at her, then at the others. "I didn't make a name," I said gently. "I just stopped letting you erase it. No anger. No shouting. Just truth." She nodded, her throat tightening. "We were wrong," she whispered. "I know," I said. "But it's okay. You taught me something valuable. Never rely on anyone else to tell your story." Later that evening, I sat alone in my hotel room, still in my black silk dress, watching the replay of the show. The camera had caught everything, the emotion, the pride, the reckoning. And when the closing shot lingered on my quote again, I whispered to myself, "That's for you, little Harley." The one they told to dream smaller. My phone buzzed with messages. Thousands of strangers thanking me for saying what they'd always wanted to say to their own families, and somewhere in the middle of all those notifications was one text that made me pause. From my mother. "I cried tonight, not because of what they did, but because of what you became. You didn't just prove them wrong, Harley. You proved yourself right." That night, I didn't feel anger or revenge. I felt release. The setup was complete. The truth had been spoken on the stage that mattered most. Not to hurt them, but to heal me. I had turned my pain into performance, my silence into story, my past into power. And the best part? The whole world had watched it unfold. When the cameras turned off that night in Vermont, I thought my story had found its ending. But what I didn't know then was that closure isn't the final chapter. It's the beginning of a new one. Because the moment I stepped into my power, those who had ignored it suddenly remembered my name. It started with an email. Subject: exciting collaboration opportunity. The sender: my cousin Lana, the same one who once told me that posting videos isn't a career. She now worked for a marketing agency, and her message was drenched in forced enthusiasm. "Harley, I saw your segment on Homegrown Voices. It was incredible. We're actually hosting a national campaign featuring top digital creators, and your brand would be a perfect fit. I read the email twice before smiling. There it was. The strike was coming full circle, and they didn't even know it. Instead of deleting it, I replied, "Hi, Lana, that sounds great. Let's set up a meeting to discuss the details. Best, Harley." It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reflection, showing them what growth looks like when you stop asking for permission. The meeting was scheduled for the following week in Las Vegas. My home turf now. The irony was beautiful. Years ago, I had begged them to take me seriously in their offices. Now they were flying to mine. I prepared carefully. My assistant, June, booked the studio's glass conference room. Sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows, the city skyline glittering in the background. I wanted them to feel the difference between who I was and who I'd become. When they walked in, I stood to greet them. Calm, composed, confident. Lana blinked as she looked around. "Wow, Harley, this place is amazing." "Thank you," I said, gesturing to the chairs. "It's taken a while to build." Her colleague, a man I didn't know, smiled stiffly. "We've heard a lot about you. Your brand presence is one of the strongest in your niche." Funny, I thought. That's not what they used to say. The pitch began. They wanted me to co-host a national awareness campaign for young entrepreneurs, to inspire women to chase their dreams. Their agency had partnerships with several networks, including Win Media. Yes, that Win Media, my uncle's company. I almost laughed out loud. "So," I said, leaning forward, "your agency is in partnership with Win Media?" Lana nodded eagerly. "Yes, it's their production arm that's backing the campaign. They'll be funding the shoot and handling distribution. They think you'd be perfect for the face of it." I smiled slowly. Perfect. Because what they didn't realize was, I'd already been planning something similar. I had been developing The Haven Live, a televised adaptation of my digital platform, where creators could share their stories of resilience and transformation. I had funding, distribution, and a loyal audience base. And now, they had unknowingly walked straight into my strategy. "I'll do it," I said finally, watching their eyes widen in relief. "But on one condition, full creative control. My team handles the messaging, production, and storytelling. You can manage logistics, but the Haven brand stays untouched." The man looked uneasy. "That's highly unconventional." Lana gave him a warning glance, then turned back to me. "Of course, Harley. I'm sure we can make that work." Good, because I wasn't asking. When the contract arrived 2 weeks later, I had my lawyer revise every clause. I wasn't just joining their campaign. I was owning it. By the time they realized, it was too late. My logo, my voice, my influence, all stamped across their project. The press releases framed it perfectly. Influencer Harley Steve partners with Win. Media for National Empowerment Initiative. The irony burned deliciously. The same company that once dismissed me now had to promote me. On the day of the campaign launch, I walked onto the studio set, sleek minimalist, with giant backlit banners reading The Haven X Win Media. Cameras rolled, lights shimmered, and the crew buzzed around like clockwork. My uncle stood near the monitors, his expression unreadable. "Harley," he said finally, "you've done well for yourself." I met his gaze, unflinching. "I told you I would," he gave a forced smile. "This collaboration will be great exposure for both of us." I tilted my head slightly. "Exposure's nice. Ownership's better." He didn't reply. He didn't need to. When the red light on the main camera turned on, I looked straight into the lens, not just as a creator, but as a woman who had clawed her way out of dismissal and into dominance. "My name is Harley Steve," I began, "and for years, people told me my dreams were unrealistic, too loud, too messy, too digital to matter. But I learned something along the way. Your dreams don't have to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. They only need to fit inside you." Applause erupted from the crew. Cameras zoomed closer. "And to everyone watching," I continued, "especially those who were told they're too much, let them say it. Because someday they'll be saying it from the audience." The silence that followed was thunderous. The moment Perfect. When the episode aired a week later, the response was explosive. My face was everywhere, on news sites, trending hashtags, viral sound bites. But the real satisfaction came when Win Media's official account shared the clip with the caption, "Proud to work with the incomparable. Harley Steve, a true inspiration. The internet loved it, but I loved it more." Because behind that polished tweet was a truth my family could never erase. The woman they once mocked had become the brand they now depended on. That night, as I sat on my balcony overlooking the glowing strip, I felt no anger, no bitterness, just power. Not the kind that crushes others, but the kind that stands unshakable no matter who tries to bury it. Revenge had found its rhythm, and it sounded a lot like peace. You know that moment when the whole world catches up to what you've known all along, when truth, after years of being buried under mockery and silence, bursts into the light for everyone to see? That was my reckoning. The episode aired on a Sunday night, primetime television. Within minutes, social media exploded. Clips of my monologue flooded every platform: Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, TikTok edits layered with emotional piano music. Hashtags like Harley Unstoppable and The Haven Effect began trending across multiple countries. It wasn't just my words that resonated. It was the tone, the conviction, the unapologetic authenticity. People weren't seeing an influencer anymore. They were seeing a movement. And with every view, every share, every repost, my family's silence grew heavier. The next morning, my assistant June walked into my office with a tablet in hand and a grin she couldn't hide. "You might want to see this," she said. On the screen was a news headline that made my heart stop for a beat. Harley Steve's empowerment campaign becomes a cultural phenomenon. Win Media faces backlash over past treatment. The article detailed my rise, my beginnings, the neglect, the quiet dismissals from those who should have believed in me first. Then it turned sharp. Someone, likely an insider, had leaked an old email thread between my uncle's executives. It was dated from years ago, when I'd first started The Haven. One line stood out in bold: "She'll never make it far enough to matter. Don't waste time associating with her brand." The internet did what the internet does best. It devoured hypocrisy. Screenshots spread like wildfire. Comments poured in by the thousands. This didn't age well. Imagine underestimating someone this hard. The same people who buried her are now standing in her spotlight. By afternoon, Win Media's official account had turned off comments entirely. I should have been furious. I should have felt vindicated. But instead, I felt strangely calm, almost detached. The truth was out, and it wasn't mine to weaponize anymore. The world had done that for me. June looked at me expectantly. "Do you want to issue a statement?" I shook my head. "No. Let silence say what words can't." But silence never lasts long when the world's watching. The next day, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. "Harley." My uncle's voice was rough, tired, not the booming arrogance I'd grown up with. "I suppose you've seen the articles," he said. "I have," I replied coolly. A pause. Then a sigh. "Look, this wasn't supposed to happen. We were wrong to dismiss you, I admit that. But this bad press is hurting everyone. Maybe you could make a statement, something to ease the narrative." I almost laughed. "Ease the narrative? You mean protect your reputation?" I said softly. "Not mine. Harley, please. Family should stand together." I looked out the window at the Vegas skyline, the city that had embraced me when my family hadn't. You only remember I'm family when it's convenient. I stood alone for years, and now that the world's clapping, you want to join the applause. No, this time you'll watch from the audience. He didn't speak again. He just breathed, slow, regretful, before the line went dead. That night, the story evolved again. A national news anchor referenced me in a primetime discussion about underdogs reclaiming their narratives. They played a clip from the show, me saying, "You don't need to be chosen when you can choose yourself." It was surreal watching myself on TV, my words dissected and admired like they belonged to someone else. For a fleeting second, I felt that familiar ache, the little girl who once begged for her family to notice her. But then I remembered, they didn't have to anymore. The world already had. A few days later, I was invited to appear on the Sunrise Hour, one of the biggest morning talk shows in the country. I almost declined. I didn't want to sound like I was gloating, but June convinced me. "Harley," she said, "this isn't gloating. It's storytelling. You've earned your platform." She was right. So I flew out to New York. The studio lights were warm, the air thick with anticipation. The host smiled as the cameras rolled. "Harley, your campaign has become a global symbol of resilience, but there's something everyone wants to know. How does it feel to be celebrated by the same world that once ignored you?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "It feels necessary," I said. "Not because I needed revenge, but because I needed reflection. We all do. Sometimes the people who doubt you are the reason you learn to stand taller. So I don't hate them. I thank them." The host leaned forward. "Even your family?" A quiet smile curved my lips. "Especially them." The audience erupted into applause. When I left the studio, a crowd had gathered outside. Strangers waved signs that said, "The Haven saved me and Harley's words healed my heart." One young woman, maybe 19, approached me with trembling hands. "You don't know me," she said, tears in her eyes. "But I was about to give up on everything, my art, my life, until I found your videos. You made me believe I could matter again." I hugged her, feeling the weight of all the years I'd spent wanting to matter myself. Maybe this was what power really looked like. Not the spotlight, but the ripple. By the time I returned to Las Vegas, the headlines had softened. Wynn Media had issued a public apology, calling my success a source of pride for the entire Wynn family. It was damage control disguised as grace, but I didn't need to expose them further. I didn't need another confrontation. The truth had already spoken, loudly, beautifully, irreversibly. That weekend, I hosted a live event for The Haven, featuring creators from all over the world. We streamed to over 1 million viewers, and as I stood backstage watching them speak, laugh, and cry, I realized something profound. The people who once tried to silence me had indirectly given me a platform to help others find their voice. That was the most poetic strike of all. Later that night, my mother called. Her voice was soft. "I saw the show," she said. "Your cousins did too. They cried." I didn't know how to respond. "You did it, Harley," she whispered. "You really did it." And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to cry too. Not from pain, but from release. The storm had passed, but the air still carried the scent of rain. That's how success felt. Not the thunder of applause, but the calm after years of weathering disbelief. Weeks after the broadcast and the public reckoning, the world kept moving. The hashtags quieted. The press stopped chasing sound bites. My inbox overflowed with collaboration offers, but my heart wanted something quieter. Something real. For the first time in years, I felt ready to stop performing and start living. One Saturday morning, I drove out to the edge of the city. No cameras, no assistants, no schedule. Just me. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, the horizon soft and pale beneath the rising sun. I parked the car, stepped out, and let the stillness sink in. This was what peace sounded like. No validation, no expectation. I thought about everything that had happened. The humiliation, the disbelief, the relentless fight for recognition, and then the applause, the vindication, the bittersweet justice that came when those who mocked me were forced to acknowledge what they'd denied for years. But what lingered wasn't victory. It was exhaustion, the kind that doesn't fade with rest, because it's carved into your bones. That night, I sat on my balcony, watching the Vegas skyline shimmer like a dream I used to chase. My phone buzzed with messages, but I ignored them all, until one name caught my eye. Lana, my cousin, the one who had once belittled my dreams, the one who had stood beside my uncle at every dismissal. Her message was short. "Can we talk?" For a moment I hovered over the screen. Then I typed back, tomorrow. My office. Noon. It was time for a conversation years overdue. The next day, she arrived early. A first. She looked different. Not the smug confidence I remembered, but humility. Real, heavy humility. Harley, she began quietly. I owe you an apology. I gestured for her to sit. You do, she exhaled shakily. I was cruel. Jealous even. We all were. You had something we didn't, courage, and we mocked it because we couldn't match it. Her words didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was the tear sliding down her cheek. I watched your interviews, she said. I didn't expect to cry, but I did. You weren't just talking about you. You were talking about all of us, the people too scared to try. For the first time, I saw her as human, flawed, scared, regretful. I nodded slowly. I don't hate you, Lana, but I had to stop needing you to see me. That's the only way I survived. She nodded, her voice trembling. I know. And I hope one day you can forgive us. I smiled softly. I already have. Forgiveness isn't about freeing you. It's about freeing me. After she left, I sat in silence for a long time. That conversation, brief, honest, unpolished, had done more for my healing than all the applause in the world. Revenge had given me justice, but forgiveness gave me peace. 2 weeks later, I returned to Vermont. Not for another show or interview, but for something simpler. My mother had invited me to visit the old family home. Everyone's calmer now, she'd said on the phone. Maybe it's time. The drive there was surreal. The same winding roads, the same cracked wooden sign at the edge of town, but everything looked smaller, like the memories had shrunk to fit the woman I'd become. When I walked into the house, I was greeted by silence, then the faint smell of coffee and cinnamon rolls. My mother hugged me first, her embrace soft and trembling. Then came the others, hesitant, awkward, remorseful. My uncle approached last. Harley, he said quietly, I never said this before, but I was wrong. You proved that success isn't about privilege. It's about perseverance. I studied his face, the lines, the pride, the regret. I didn't do it to prove you wrong, I said. I did it to prove me right. He smiled weakly. Still, I'm proud. I believed him, maybe for the first time. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, I sat on the porch where I'd once written ideas in a notebook no one cared about. My mother joined me, 2 cups of tea in hand. You've grown into everything I hoped you'd be, she said softly. I smiled. It just took the world a little while to catch up. She laughed, and the sound felt like home. For the first time, I wasn't looking back with anger. I was looking back with understanding. Every cruel comment, every dismissal, every closed door. It had all pushed me toward my independence. They hadn't broken me. They'd built me. That night, I opened my journal and wrote, Vindication is loud, but peace is quiet. I used to think I wanted them to hear me, but all I really needed was to hear myself. The next morning, I drove back to Las Vegas, but something had shifted. The road didn't feel like an escape anymore. It felt like a return. Because the truth was, I had already won long before the cameras, the interviews, or the headlines. I'd won the day I chose to believe in myself when no one else would. Months later, when the Havens Annual Summit was held, I stood before thousands of attendees. But this time, I wasn't speaking to prove anything. I was speaking to remind them that resilience isn't born in victory. It's born in being unseen, unheard, underestimated. I ended the keynote with a line that had carried me through everything. When they try to bury you. Remember, you're not buried, you're planted. The crowd rose to their feet. Applause thundered. But my smile wasn't about pride. It was about peace. Because the woman standing there was no longer fueled by revenge. She was fueled by purpose. I used to believe that revenge was the destination. That once everyone who hurt me saw me standing tall, my heart would finally rest. But now, as I stand here beneath the stage lights, looking out at thousands of faces illuminated by hope, I realize something profound. Revenge was never the goal. Healing was, It's been a year since the Haven Summit. The world has kept turning, but this time it turns with my story woven into it, not as a wound, but as a reminder. I've learned that when the world ignores you, the silence becomes your training ground. When it mocks you, it sharpens you. And when it finally claps for you, you understand that applause doesn't mean acceptance. It means you've learned to accept yourself. Tonight, I'm closing the summit with my final keynote, a full circle moment. As the countdown clock blinks backstage, June squeezes my hand. "You ready?" she asks. I smile. More than ever. The stage manager's voice echoes through the headset. "Harley Steve, you're live in 5, 4, 3, and then it's my turn." The lights hit my face as I walk to center stage, microphone in hand. The roar of the audience fades into a gentle hum as I take a deep breath. "My name is Harley Steve," I begin, and for most of my life, I thought the world's approval was the highest prize. I thought love had to be earned through perfection and respect through silence. But I was wrong. I look out across the sea of faces, young creators, mothers, teachers, dreamers, all carrying their own stories of rejection and resilience. I've learned that peace doesn't come from proving anyone wrong. It comes from living in a way that proves you were right to believe in yourself all along. The crowd listens in perfect stillness. Once upon a time, I continue, I wanted my family to see me, to be proud, to say, "We knew you could do it." But now I know. I didn't need them to believe in me. I just needed to believe in me. A murmur ripples through the audience, that quiet recognition when pain meets truth. Later, during the post-event gala, my mother joins me near the balcony. The night air is soft, the city lights stretching endlessly below. "You were brilliant tonight," she says, her voice filled with pride. I laugh lightly. "You say that every time." "Because every time it's true," she smiles. "Your father would have loved to see this." The mention of him brings a bittersweet ache. He'd passed before the Haven became what it is. But sometimes when I'm alone, I still feel him in the quiet. The one person who always told me, "Don't wait for their approval, Harley. Shine anyway." I look up at the sky. I hope he knows. "He does," my mother says softly. And in that moment, I believe her. The next morning, I wake early. No cameras, no interviews, just the quiet rustle of morning light. I pour myself a cup of coffee and sit by the window, journaling like I used to in the early days when no one read my words but me. This time, I write not out of desperation, but out of gratitude. Dear younger me, I know you were scared. I know you cried when they laughed. But look at us now. Not because we proved them wrong, but because we never stopped believing in right. You made peace with the noise. You turned pain into purpose. You built a world no one could take from you. And that, my dear, is freedom. I close the journal and smile. That's when my phone buzzes. A notification. An article trending again. I click it absent-mindedly, only to see the headline, "From Ridicule to Revolution, How Harley Steve Redefined Empowerment." It isn't about drama or scandal this time. It's about impact. The journalist writes, Harley Steve didn't just prove her critics wrong. She taught an entire generation how to rewrite their stories without bitterness. Her greatest revenge was becoming unbreakable. I let the words sink in, not as validation, but as closure. That evening, I take a walk through the quiet streets behind my office. I pass a small cafe, the kind I used to sit in years ago, sketching ideas and hoping someone would believe in them. A group of young women sit inside now, laughing, one of them wearing a hoodie that says The Haven Collective. I stand outside for a moment, smiling. They don't see me, and that's the beauty of it. They don't need to. The movement was never about me. It was about what came after me. I whisper under my breath, "Keep going," and I walk away. Months later, the Haven Foundation launches a scholarship for women in underrepresented communities, creators, writers, entrepreneurs who are starting where I once stood. During the press event, reporters ask what inspired the name. I grin. It's called the Root Fund, because every tree that grows tall remembers the darkness it came from. The applause that follows isn't for me. It's for what I've built. Now, as I look back at my journey, the betrayal, the humiliation, the rise, the reckoning, it all feels like a movie I once starred in, but no longer need to replay. The past no longer hurts. It just hums, a melody that shaped me. And to everyone who ever doubted me, I silently say thank you. Because without your disbelief, I would have never learned faith. Without your rejection, I would have never built my own door. Without your silence, I would have never found my own voice. When people ask me now what revenge feels like, I smile and say, it feels like peace. It feels like being too busy living to keep score. So, if you're watching this, if you're listening to my story and you see your own reflection in it, remember this. You don't have to wait for permission to rise. You don't need validation to shine. You don't need revenge to heal. You just need to believe that the pain you're carrying is shaping the person you're meant to become. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too deserve respect and unconditional love. Because sometimes, the loudest revenge isn't triumph, it's transformation, moral reflection. Because when the world refuses to see your light, your only job is to keep shining until it can't look away. So tell me, what's your story? When did you stop waiting for someone else's permission to be extraordinary?